So this lecture will make you ready for your various techniques related to scattering and diffraction. So pay attention. Yeah. I'll go slow, so you remain focused. In this lecture, we are going to learn some basic terminologies of scattering and diffraction, such as scattering cross-section, differential scattering cross-section, wave particle nature, coherent and incoherent scattering, inelastic and elastic uh, scattering. We are also going to learn about atomic form factor. We are going to learn about scattering factor. We are going to learn about mean free path. We are also going to learn about the differences between various types of particles, right? So there are many concepts which will be useful to you. And please mark your attendance and okay, and don't okay. So you can, if you have any question, just unmute yourself and ask, because I'm not going to check the chat box. And Manisha is taking attendance already. Yeah. So it will, this today's lecture is will be extremely beneficial. If you miss it, then you are going to really have problem later on. So this lecture will help you to prepare to understand. Sorry, there is a typo there. To understand deeper questions about outcome of scattering of various particles with matter, irrespective of. Please note that I have especially mentioned this here. Irrespective of type of uh, particles, be it electrons, photons, or even neutrons, actually. So I hope that you know the difference between scattering and diffraction. Scattering is actually a larger term. Everything is actually scattering. So reflection, refraction, diffraction, everything comes in scattering. Okay, whatever you have, uh, whatever science you are doing, whether it is related to photons or related to electrons. So I will be using another thing. I will be using the terminology wave and particle. I will, frequently I'll be interchanging between them. So one participant in the SDP workshop we organized, he asked me that, oh, you are using sometime wave and sometime particle. I said that these are the two facets which you use. It depends upon what you see actually. Okay, so de Broglie's equation gives us, and quantum mechanics gives us liberty to use them at will. So scattering, when we talk about scattering, we normally talk about uh, particle nature, right? And when we talk about diffraction, we talk about wave. And when we talk about diffraction, we normally talk about uh, uh, you know, diff, from multiple particles which are arranged in a periodic lattice, right? But in scattering, you can just talk about single particle actually, or particles randomly arranged. Hmm? You can you can have only single scatterer actually. Okay, so. So normally in diffraction also you can start explaining by single slit, but it is less useful because you can have double slit or. But in real life, in practice, you usually look at the systems where you have multiple uh, scattering objects which are periodically arranged. So they are actually scattering objects, right? But we use the term diffraction. So we'll be explaining that. So now the question is that why do we need to understand electron sample interaction? Because all these theories about scattering and diffraction is an effort to understand the interaction of electron with the matter, right? We are trying to understand the interaction between electrons and matter. When I say matter, again I say that matter, electrons and protons and neutrons inside the matter, right? Okay, so we need to understand these things. Otherwise, we will not get any. So scattering is needed. So scattering is needed, and diffraction is needed. Otherwise, we cannot learn about matter. If there is no scattering, if the particle, suppose some particle is coming and then and this is your material, and it just goes without scattering, you will not get any information about the matter. Okay, so it has to interact, it has to scatter. Okay, scattering does not mean that it has to bend always at some angle. Scattering can be happen at 0 degree. I mean, scattering does not, I mean, again, same with the diffraction actually. Scattering, there is something called forward scattering and backward scattering. Okay? So whenever we talk about scattering, we have this notion in our mind that after scattering, object has to turn some direction, or even with the diffraction, we always think that, oh, it has to turn in some direction. You can have zero, you can have 0, 0, 0 diffraction. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to teach you about this. So that does not mean unscattered actually. This is actually called direct beam in electron microscopy. It is actually, we in layman term, we say that these electrons are transmitted, but they do see the matter, they talk to the matter. Even the electrons which are traveling straight, having talked to your specimen, they just chose to follow certain angle, be it 0 degree or be it some other degree, right? Same is true with the scattering. So basically, suppose a photon is coming and there is a scatter, which is your sample. The photon can choose to, after having interacted with the matter, photon can choose to. It depends upon the physics which has undergone, but photon can be in any direction actually, right? In all 360 degree, right? Okay, so that is so scattering and diffraction does not mean that it should always show some change in the path. So that uh, that knowledge which you learned earlier should be raised. That change of path does not is not required in order for you to see these phenomena, right? Yeah. So I repeat this. I conclude this. After scattering, photons or electrons can choose to continue in the same path. I mean, in the case of photons get absorbed and then they oscillate the charge cloud, and then there is a re-emission. We call it like a scattering actually. In the case of electron, it does not happen. So similar to visible light interaction with the dust or any other surfaces, please, I mean, there is some text, but it is extremely important that you follow this text. This text is not useless. Okay? So reflection, otherwise you're going to miss a lot of things. Reflection or refraction, which are two forms of scattering. So we cannot see anything in electron microscopy images unless the specimen has interacted with and scattered the electron in some way. In some way, it has to interact. Remember the movies? I put these lines actually yesterday. Hollow Man. How many people have seen the movie Hollow Man? I have seen 2 times. Hollow Man. There was one sequel also. How many people have seen Hollow Man? Somebody has seen Hollow Man? Oh,
No.
Harsh, you have seen Hollow Man?
No, sir.
All of you must see Hollow Man. I am a movie buff. I mean, when I see movies, then I get completely lost into the movie. Okay, and nobody should disturb me at that time. I mean, I spend a lot of time in selection of the movies. Actually, that's another thing. And many times I quit the movie within first 5 minutes because if I realize that it does not worth of my time, I don't spend 1.5 hours that I rarely watch Hindi movies because I don't have patience to sit uh, for 2 hours and shed tears. Okay, that's what people do. Okay, but Mr. India, people you have seen actually, right? Mr.
Yes,
India
sir.
देखा है?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
yes.
Yes,
उसमें
sir.
ah,
Yes, sir.
so yes, so Mr. India was probably a inspiration from Hollow Man. Hollow Man became was much more popular, and it was so basically the person becomes invisible due to some scientific discovery, and our Anil Kapoor also becomes invisible actually, right? And it is another thing. This Hollow Man does some crimes or something. Our Anil Kapoor start, romancing with I think Sri Devi or somebody, dancing in the rain or something like that. That is all stupid Bollywood stuff, actually, right?
That's Devi. That's Devi.
Yeah. So our Indian movie star will just start romancing and dancing around and something like that. Okay. That's why I don't watch those movies actually, Bollywood movies. So anyway,
And sir,
so
Mogambo खुश हुआ.
हाँ, मोगेम्बो से लड़ा था क्या मिस्टर इंडिया?
Mogambo खुश हुआ.
हाँ, अच्छा, मोगेम्बो से लड़ा था। ओके, मोगेम्बो को मारा था शायद उसने। चलो ठीक है। ओके,
Yes, sir.
हाँ, अच्छा काम भी किया। Yeah, चलो। So this, so any non-scattering object is practically invisible. Okay, so you are visible because light is getting scattered off your surface. So now another problem is that that means we have a scattering. We have to define the area. Suppose this is an object. Okay, this is an object. This is an object, and we say that suppose some radiation is coming, any radiation, it can be electron beam or photon beam. So what is the scattering cross section? When we say that what is the scattering cross section, and after that this beam may get scattered, right? So scattering cross section of this area, suppose this is the diameter is d. Okay, so for example our radius is r. Okay, so you can, so so basically that area is pi r square, that's a physical dimension actually. So scattering cross section is the area which this beam sees this particle as. I mean, suppose we see this particle as from our eyes actually. So, but the electrons or photons do not see the particle the way we see. So you have to change the perception. Okay, I always say that you have to change the perception which is ingrained into your brain because of your five senses. This incoming radiation will see not even atoms. It does not know atom. Atom is a very fake concept. It will look at charges, it will look at electrons, it will look at protons, right? And depending upon the type of radiation, it can even look at the neutrons, the spin of the neutrons, right? There is a spin on the, okay, and and charges of protons and Coulombian interaction. So I mean, X-rays that does not even bother about nucleus, only it bothers about the electrons which are orbiting around the nucleus, right? But it will see, so scattering cross section of, suppose this is an atom, it is not the physical dimension of suppose an atom size is suppose this diameter is 2 angstrom. Okay, so when this is, I'm talking about some arbitrary atom. Okay, diameter is 2 angstrom, but when the electrons come and collide with this atom which has got uh, a diameter of 2 angstrom, you can ask me how do you define the diameter of an atom, which is actually a very difficult question. Actually, it's not easy. That how do you define, how do you know that electron cloud, how far electron cloud is extending? But there is some some consensus that you can, because atom, I do when I say that atom is a fictional particle. Okay, it's a fictional particle. So when electron comes, so it will not see this atom as 2 angstrom, because there is nothing as such. I mean, there is nothing as atom actually. So it may see this uh, particle much smaller actually. Like like for example, maybe 10,000 times smaller than this size. Probably it will see somewhere around 10 to power minus 15 meter, or okay, or probably even a fraction of a picometer actually. So we'll discuss about this at the end of this. So please note that, so this what you learned today, that scattering cross-section concept is very tricky. So okay, so to don't get fooled by the physical dimension of the particle or matter. So in TEM, we are usually most interested in those electrons which that do not deviate that far from the incident electron direction. This is because TM is constructed, it is designed to get the electrons primarily and okay, these electrons primarily. And so basically we are interested in internal structure and chemistry actually. So this information we usually get from the electrons which are either scattered exactly, uh, they are following the same path, or they have got diffracted at a smaller angle actually, right? We are interested in that. We are not interested in actually backscattered electrons. So how do we define backscattered electrons? Electrons which are scattered more than 90 degree, we define, okay, this is like 90 degree, right? This is 90 degree. So when the angle of scattering is more than 90 degree, we say that these are backscattered. And if it is less than 90 degree, then we say it is forward scattered, right? I hope it is clear. But in SEM, we are also interested in backscattered electron because there is no forward scattering. We are interested in secondary electrons. You have seen in the previous lecture series which we conducted on the SEM. And we are also interested in their importance in giving us the information about topography and whatnot. Okay, so let us skip it. Now, this angular, so this, suppose some electron flux is coming actually, okay, some flux. I told you already that there is not more than one electron at a given time in your specimen. So please consider that, please keep it in mind all the time. So suppose electrons are, so when I write, this is just to explain these straight lines as intensity. It is just for you to, just for conceptual understanding. So suppose electrons are falling onto this sample with uniform intensity all over the selected area. Suppose you selected this area, and the electron flux is uniform over a period of, suppose, 1 second. Number of electrons falling anywhere during in this specimen is the same. Okay, if you take average of number of electrons falling actually over 1 second, they're quite large. Within 1 second, there are many electrons which will pass through. But if you look at the outgoing intensity, you will always find the variation, and that forms your image. So your TEM image is actually the deviation in the intensity. So somewhere you will find that this spot you have less electrons, here you have more electrons, somewhere you have less, somewhere something like that. There is an intensity variation. And what is the reason? For that, we need to understand electron and matter interaction, because without understanding this, we cannot understand why this some particular catalyst or some polymer is looking bright, or this particle is looking dark. You will not understand. You will not be able to. So it has highly practical usefulness, because we cannot interpret the TM images if we do not understand why there are certain area allows more electrons, certain areas allow less electrons. So please note that this is we are going to study. And another concept that you make diffraction pattern when you look at the Bragg diffracted electrons, and then there are other forward scattered wheel like Hardhaugh is also here. Okay. Next concept, that you can select what you want through the aperture. So we are going to study the role of apertures and detectors, but not in this lecture, in some other subsequent lecture. So how do you select, for example, how do you select that this beam versus this beam versus this beam? Because they all carry different information about the sample, be it chemistry, be it crystallography, right? These are the two things which are chemistry, which chemistry student is interested in: crystallography and chemistry. So crystallography is hidden here, chemistry is chemistry and morphology also. Chemistry is hidden here in Hardhaugh. Morphology is hidden here. Okay, so how are you going to select that I'm going to block these? So this is done essentially by the combination of apertures, and which allow certain beams and block other. So there are various series of apertures which we use, and you have to tell the operator that I need to see this. So he or she will choose the right kind of apertures. And today I'm going to show you some of the important apertures and in the electron microscopy, which you must be familiar with. Those are the minimum things which will be required. Okay. So we are interested in the non-uniform distribution of electrons, and I am repeating this. What makes this non-uniform distribution of electrons? Your sample. Non-uniform distribution of electrons can happen due to three reasons, three reasons and two different ways you can study them. In fact, there are many ways, but there are two primary reasons. One is basically spatial distribution, which forms basically a triangular TM image, and you can look at the angular distribution, where you do the similar thing in X-ray diffraction also, where you connect the intensity with angle theta, and you basically look at this X-ray diffraction pattern. The same thing you do in DEM when you are looking at intensity of scattered electrons versus particular angle. So it gives you information about crystallography, and this gives you information about your basically topography. Also, it gives you information about crystallography as well. If you do this HRTM, if you use it in HRTM image, so spatial distribution can also give you information about crystallography. Then you need to basically mix this straight beam and the diffracted beam. You have to merge them. Then actually this spatial distribution fringes which you get, intensity fringes, that can give you information about crystallography as well, and in form of an image, you get an image actually. So that's what we do by using an aperture. So one of the example is in front of your screen. I told you that there are three reasons for non-uniform distribution. There are three reasons actually, which you always, I think I have been telling all the time. One, actually there are, this one reason actually is coupled here in, two reasons are coupled as one, but actually they are distinct. One is mass, another is thickness. So your sample may have varying thickness. So that is one of the reasons that you will see non-uniform distribution. For example, suppose nobody tells you that this is carbon and this is iron oxide. Suppose if this information is not available to you, and this is basically a TEM image, and you can see this scale is 100 nanometer. This is called bright field TEM image. And if this information is not available to you, how will you know? What you know actually is that here you have these lighter areas. Here you have more electrons coming. So there you can see there is a non-uniform distribution. So here you have more electrons coming to the detector. Here you have slightly less than this in comparison to this. here you have increasingly less and less electrons which are coming, which are able to reach the detector. And you can see that here, this area is quite blocking the, basically a lot of electrons. It's blocking actually, it's not allowing. That's why it is dark. So darker area means less electrons are reaching to the detector and more electrons are being absorbed by the, or they're not absorbed, basically they may be scattered. That's what I'm going to tell you, that this does not mean that these electrons are necessarily being absorbed, but they are getting, they might be getting diffracted in another direction. Okay, you understand? So that we are going to show you here. So that does not, so there are three reasons actually, so that why this area may be darker than this. So one of the reason is mass. Mass means, mass is a very basically misleading term. We now don't use atomic mass, we use atomic number. So but old fashioned, you know that from Mendeleev's historical contribution, we started using mass, and but now we use atomic number. So basically it's atomic number Z. So Z contribution is there, Z contrast. So that means if you ignore other two contributions, so that means this darker area might be higher Z. So you can sorry, higher Z. So immediately you can, your mind should run, it looks like, you know, there are heavier elements, and chemistry student will be excited. Okay, this looks like, you know, higher Z. So suppose this is uniform thickness, but your mind may also say that no, it can be thickness also, it may be, you know, suppose this information is not available to you. Okay, you can say that this is basically this part may still be iron oxide, but maybe of a smaller thickness. Okay, how do you know? I mean, okay, so but so the contrast comes, non-uniform distribution of electrons can come from mass. Okay, that is atomic number. So heavier the element which electrons experience, so electrons will get scattered more in other direction, and it will be blocked also. Okay, so scattering also happens more, and they are also blocked actually. That there will be backscattering also. You remember Rutherford backscattering? We were studying backscatter. So higher Z will turn the electrons in another direction. So that means less electrons are reaching. So this contrast is directly related to your Hardaf, what we understood earlier, Hardaf or RBS. So more electrons reaching, to these detectors, Hardaf or backscatter detector, means less available here. So it is same. I mean, the total number of electrons which are falling onto the sample are the same. So if some electrons are, from some specific area are reaching less to the detector, that means they are going somewhere else. Okay, they are going somewhere else. They are not just, they cannot be just, lost into the sample. Otherwise, it will create charging problem. We saw that charging problem. Okay, or they are actually, you have to ground that sample. So electrons are not like photons. Photons can, you can convert the energy of photons and to something else. You can create newer photons. You can split the photons. You can do all kinds of things. You can create Stokes shift. You can create anti-Stokes shift. But you don't do that with electrons, right? You can't do that. So there is so you can see that suppose this is carbon, this is a polymer, and this is suppose your tin or gold. So here you will see less. So then you will see this intensity profile here immediately. Okay, you will see this here. Some more intensity here, less intensity, whatever it is. So this is actually the inverted image here. So third, actually you should consider it third, okay, because we have already discussed two. So only there are three possibilities. Other possibilities that here electrons are reaching less, that means they are diffracted in other direction. And this, you see, I don't have an example right now, but I will show you example from my own lab. Suppose you are imaging uniform gold nanoparticle, which are which are of same thickness, okay, and so, and they're gold, so that means Z is same, thickness is same, but still you will see under TEM that this gold nanoparticle looks darker and some of them look brighter, and this is regularly seen actually. Even in iron oxide also, we see all the time that one particle looks brighter. So that is the case because of the facets actually. That gives you information about. So some facets are, so when it happens when some particular particle is aligned in such a way that it meets the Bragg condition, and part of the electrons are actually sent into another direction. That means suppose 1,000 electrons are coming this way. So that means, suppose I'm just telling you there are several other processes. Suppose these are the only two processes which are bound to happen. Just ignore all other processes like backscattering and other stuff. So suppose 900 electrons are landing up here, and 100 electrons are one case. You know they are just lost into diffraction. They are not lost, but not lost to the detector, not reaching here. That means, when I say lost, means not lost, basically they're not reaching to the detector. So that means this will look darker actually. Suppose this particle is aligned in such a way that this diffraction is not happening. Okay, so that means all 100 particles will end up here, and it's the same particle, mass is same, and thickness is same. So what else has? So that means this diffraction is very serious thing. Because of diffraction, you may still see the contrast. So please remember, these are very important concepts. And now we'll discuss a little bit, I promised you, about apertures. And I assure you that you will not understand much in first round, but this picture will be repeated. And if you have not understood anything, don't worry about it. We are going to come back in a full, with full force later on. And we're going to, in the third round. This is now second round. Today we have started second round. In third round, we will dig deeper into these modes. So if you see that you have this electron beam, and this is your sample, this here, and this is your condenser C1 and C2, upper objective, lower objective. So these upper objective, lower objectives are very important lenses because your sample is sandwiched between these two lenses. So basically, this upper objective lens, you can see that this defines actually this parallel beam. If you notice, I hope you are all using laptops or desktop. You are not using mobile. Please avoid using mobile for my lectures because you will have trouble. Okay, if you are using mobile, so it is my lectures are not compatible with mobile phone. Don't do that. So so you can see that this upper objective lens is responsible pretty much to decide what kind of beam is entering into the sample. And this lower objective is basically this is the first lens which is receiving those electrons actually. It decides basically the reception of the, okay, you can see that these two lenses are very important actually. And for magnetic samples, so this upper objective and lower objective lenses create a lot of problems because they are very strong and they're very close to the part. So you have to switch off actually some of these lenses in order to minimize the magnetic field on the magnetic particles which might be here. Okay, and there are other tricks actually I'm not going to discuss here. So now this beam is split into three parts. One is basically the electrons which are coming straight, and other two which are diffracted at angle theta. When I say other two, what I mean that this is for the two-dimensional picture, but actually the diffraction is happening three-dimensional, right? It's a cone. If you look at from the top, actually, suppose this is if you're looking from the top and electrons are traveling downwards, so this is basically they will make like a cone, like birthday cap. Okay, so so top part is your electron beam which is coming. So so if you look at the birthday cap of different angle, one is basically larger, another is, so diffraction happens pretty much in the same way. It is three-dimensional, but for the convenience we just show two-dimensional and two beams, something like that, but it does not really happen. So you have to just rotate these two angles 360 degree, then actually that is the true diffraction, right? It basically forms like a circle in the on the screen. We'll come back to that. So now you can see that suppose you you put this aperture, you can see that this aperture is put here, objective aperture, and that this blocks, you can see that it blocks these two diffracted beam. This is not so you have one beam like this and another beam which is coming like this. And so aperture, what it does, so it blocks this and it blocks this. It only allows this here. Okay, so then you get the information about topography, and this is called bright field imaging. So the image which you actually see mostly these are actually bright field images. So if you stretch these, if you keep on zooming these images, if you keep on magnifying, you will never see you will never see these fringes which we see in HRT images. So you will not see anything. You will not see rows of atoms. Okay. So another possibility is that we basically make a diffraction pattern out of that. We basically allow. You can see that objective aperture is allowing all these three beams here. Second case, you can see that it is removed actually. Okay, and if you want to make, if you want to use electron diffraction, but what it is doing, that it is selecting a specific area, selected area, as a specifically selected area. So it is selecting a specific area. For example, maybe one particle out of many. So suppose you want to do single particle electron diffraction, so you can do that. So for example, you have selected this area. This area is basically, this is one particle, and you say that I want to have electron diffraction from this. So then you allow these three beams and to converge. You can see that these three beams are converging actually. Okay, so then you get this electron diffraction spot. I'll show you something like I think I have an image. Yeah, so you will get something like this. So this is electron diffraction image. So this is basically a central beam, and these are other diffracted beams. So this is called actually 0, 0, 0 diffracted beam. Okay, and if you this is the same beam which forms these images. This image, this bright field image, is actually formed by this central beam. If you block this, if you block this, if you block this, so you block all these beams actually. You block this, all these beams. These are all diffracted beam, right? They are coming at certain angle. Okay, this is if you look at from the top, this is actually zero angle, and this is actually it is forming some angle actually, right? So if you block this and allow this, so you will get the image like this. Okay, so if you let me erase this. Okay, so if you allow if you block this and allow any of this, okay, and form an image, then you will get dark field. If you don't allow, if you block this and allow this, so what is the difference between bright field and dark field? Bright field does not give you information about particles which might be diffracting actually. Suppose you want to know, suppose you have made a catalyst, and suppose you made titanium oxide, and part of it is crystalline, part of it is amorphous. For example, you made iron selenide, okay, and so some student will just take bright field, okay, and होशियार बच्चे हैं वो, those होशियार बच्चे क्या करेंगे, वो बोलेंगे कि नहीं मुझे bright field चाहिए. I do not know, suppose I have 1 billion iron selenide particles or titanium. So out of that, maybe I'm not sure whether some particles may be amorphous, some of them may be crystalline. I'm not sure. So what I'm going to do, that I will show side by side from the same area, bright field and dark field. So bright field will not care whether, so it will show you all kinds of particles actually, okay, whatever you have selected. Suppose 10, 15 particles you have selected, they will all show up. They will show you intensity variation based on those three aspects which I told you: mass, thickness, and crystallinity contrast. But in dark field, only those particles will light up which are crystalline, not only crystalline, which based on the particular facets. Actually, suppose you want to you are working on a catalyst which shows better catalytic properties when for certain facets, actually certain lattice certain surfaces. So suppose you have grown certain selectively you have grown certain surfaces, and you want to see whether those facets are available or not. So you will basically select that beam and block other beams, and then you will allow, you will tell the operator that I want to, so then you will see only those particles where those facets are growing. Suppose you are working on crystal growth and design, and you want to look at the nucleation and growth of particle and in particular facets. So the smartest way for you to do is to tell the operator to allow a particular beam and block other beams, and then after that allow this and block other. So you know that suppose this is 200 and you allow this 200, this is, suppose I'm just telling you randomly that suppose this is 111 and you only allow 111 only, and you take, so you will only see those particles which are aligned in particular way, which diffracts actually 111 at that time. So how smart this is. So you can select this and then you can get dark field in those areas. I hope it is clear to you. It is of immense practical uses. I teach it every year, but I don't see many NCL students using this actually technique, which does not require any extra effort. I really do not know why NCL students do not use this beautiful technique of dark field. Dark field is extremely useful. Please use dark field for different facets. Okay, any question here? I thought chemistry student will ask a lot of questions. Answer, do you have any question? You are a metallurgist.
Sir, I understood here, sir. But in case of the XRD, means the X-ray detection, the bright and dark field will be different, no, sir?
No, X-ray is basically, we are talking about electron diffraction here. We're talking about electron diffraction, not about X-rays.
Hello?
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you, yes.
Hello,
yes.
sir?
Yes, I can hear you. Please. I can hear you, yes. Please go ahead. Anyway, maybe later there is some problem with your voice. So I hope this is important concept, highly applied, and people must be using it. And I'm not sure why.
Hello, sir?
Yes, sir. Yes, I can hear you. Yes, please continue. Okay, so if there is any question, probably right now, problem is that when you are in pre-PhD, you do not directly connect to your research, and by the time you have those samples in mind, you mostly, I think, forget what I've taught, and that is the problem when I see a gap between me teaching all those techniques and you using them in the lab. Actually, it's a major problem, because right now, until you have those problems you face, and that's a reason. Anyway, so next slide.
Hello, sir.
Yes, madam.
Sir, Pooja here from
Yes, Pooja.
SPPU. Sir, my question is about the limiting aperture. So I asked when she was teaching TEM, I asked her that whether this aperture is to the lens or it is something else. So my teacher said ki no, the lens doesn't have any aperture. It's
See,
just
lens itself is also an aperture. Lens opening also acts as an aperture. Every lens can be opening here. What is an aperture? Aperture is basically an area which allows certain things and blocks certain things. So lens is actually an aperture. Lens magnetic field can also, if you increase the field and decrease the field, actually you're actually manipulating the aperture actually. Okay, but these apertures are So lens openings are also an aperture. Okay? Second thing, that's number one. Second thing is that these apertures are actually metal strips where the holes of particular dimensions are there, usually platinum or something like that. So they are inserted. Okay, so suppose you are looking at 10 micron or 100 micron or 200. So particular holes are basically inserted, and that's how it is done. That's the area is selected based on the particular smallest or smaller or bigger size. Puja, does it answer your question?
Yes, sir. So, if while running a sample, when the software changes continuously from 1 nanometer to 50 nanometer, suppose, so the lens is not changing, but we are changing the aperture of using this
No, it's
platinum.
basically a combination of when you see actually 100 nanometer, it's a combination of magnification through these lenses and the aperture selection. You're also
Okay.
magnifying actually, right, these projector lenses. So then you get this smaller area. When your selected area is 100 nanometer, that does not mean that you are selecting 100 nanometer aperture. 100 nanometer aperture is not available actually. I think
Yes,
it's
sir.
okay.
That
Yeah.
was my question. Every time, how can we change it?
No, you don't change it. No.
Yes, sir.
Actually, then you basically you're conversing it actually. Okay. So suppose you have selected 100 nanometer. So because you can't have 100 nanometer aperture, you can't have 200 nanometer aperture. You have only 3-4 apertures. Basically, when you have the same beam, but you are spreading it. Now you are increasing this angle. So basically, you are selecting less, and I think I explained earlier. Basically, this angle actually decides your area of capturing actually. So for example,
So
so
you're
you
talking about the convergence angle?
exactly, yes. So when if you spread the same beam more, so basically, for example, you spread here beam more, so basically you are cutting it actually more, right? With the same aperture. I'll teach you in the coming slides. Okay. But
Okay.
the summary is that apertures are only few, 4 5, and you can't actually machine, you can't mill it. These are all regular routine machines, so you can't mill it down to such a small level. I hope it answers. So you're not constantly changing the aperture. Okay,
Okay, sir. Yes, sir. I got it.
it's a combination of lens arrangement, lens magnetic field in the lens, as well as the aperture selection, not just the only aperture.
Okay, sir. Okay.
So you learned in university also? Somebody was teaching?
Yes, sir. We are having SEM and TEM this semester.
In chemistry?
Yes, sir. In chemistry.
Who was it? I don't know much faculty, right? My friend Santosh is there. Santosh is very...
Sir. Santosh Aram is actually taking electrochemistry. There is one teacher called Anjali Athavale. Dr. Anjali Athavale.
Professor Athavale. She's very senior. Yeah.
Yes, she is teaching.
Okay. They are very
Yes, sir.
senior people actually. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So I hope the answer must be the same, more or less same, right?
Yes, sir. She said that it's not really a physical thing कि हाँ नहीं whole ही किया जाता है ऐसा कुछ नहीं है. It's just an
Yes.
interpretation thing.
It's an interpretation based on the combination of there are holes. I'll teach you about apertures. There is actually a lecture, complete lecture on lenses and aperture. There is a dedicated lecture actually. There you will learn all these things, how you select that area, and why you can select such a small area from such a large aperture. Okay, so yeah. So back to the so dark field is basically when you, as I told you, that you select one of these beams and you make image out of that. And this, believe me, for chemistry students, it is very useful for chemistry students. But somehow I don't find that use. This one I will teach you later on. It's a similar thing, but here you can see that it is far more convenient actually, because I'll tell you in detail later on. But here you bend the beam. Rather, this is actually done because you can't. For example, I told you that you have to select different spots like 111, 102. But how will you do that? How will you, as Pooja said, you can't move this aperture here and then here this spot. It's not that easy. I mean, it's not done. So what you do, instead of moving different beams, basically it is better to to basically tilt the beam. You can see the beam is tilted. So then you're using the same aperture at the same angle. So it is very convenient actually way of doing things, which I will be discussing later on. So now at least you are clear about these are the three major techniques which are routinely used. These are the simplest electron microscopy techniques. Three simplest. These are most basic. Selected area electron diffraction. Isn't it, Pooja? I think Pooja is more experienced, so you know Pooja, right?
Yes, sir.
Pooja, are you a PhD student or postdoc or a professor?
No, sir, I'm master student. I told
No,
you.
no, I don't. Pooja means he means PhD or postdoc or professor, right?
No, sir, it's masters.
No, I don't believe it.
No,
Okay, anyway, you are lying actually to us. Okay.
no, sir.
Okay, so let us understand various terminologies used in explaining diffraction. So why do you need to care about these various angles? Because as we have understood that we are looking at the electron sample interaction, which is happening at various angles. For example, you can see the transmitted angle. Transmitted electrons are coming in only very small area, and then we look at the we have the different detectors. Basically, we have Hardap detector here. You can see we have LAADF detector. We lower angle, lower annular angle. We don't. I mean, this is not much use. Mostly we use Hardap. So that's why we need to see. Now we need to. So now suppose see, one thing is clear from here, that we need to understand that how many electrons are coming in at this angle, how many electrons are coming at this angle, and from this this image also it was clear that we need to know how many electrons are coming here, how many electrons are coming here. This is about electron diffraction, and so we need to know actually all these things. How do we know that how many? What is going to be the scattering cross section of? So basically, what in simpler term we define that what is going to be the scattering cross section or probability of electron falling into this detector or this detector or this detector. Is it possible? Can we know? In some cases, yes. Some cases, no. So we'll learn about this. So that means one thing you are convinced that it is important for us to know this scattering phenomena. Now let us look at some more basic science about scattering. There is
Sir?
something called, yes,
Sir, I'm answer.
yes, answer.
Sir, I have a doubt that in the picture you have shown the brighter and the darker field images, no, sir?
Yes.
The previous one. There you mentioned some of the planes or the directions like 111 or 200 or something like that.
Yes, yes,
If we don't know what the real material is or what material is being used, how can we collect the
Yeah.
information,
Yes,
sir?
yes, very good question. I thought somebody will ask this question, so I teach it in detail. So that's what you're going to learn in this class. So, for example, what Ansar will do, Ansar will first confirm whether this material is made of same elements. So she's going to do the elemental analysis, right, Ansar? So you will do some EDAX mapping actually. So I think I taught you this in the first round, that you can do a mapping and you can see whether even this material is iron oxide. Then you will realize that this outer material is showing you a little bit of carbon. Is mostly carbon. There is no iron here. At least it will show you there is no iron. So then you know that it is not an iron, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so it is basically combination of various techniques within TM domain. So TM that's why it is so useful, that you can do EDAX mapping. You can in fact do Hardaf mapping. Hardaf will be able to tell you clearly that it is low Z and this is high Z, right?
Oh,
Hardaf right? Hardaf can tell you immediately. So, so these are the complementary techniques. So that will tell you that whether it is because of Z contrast or it is because of thickness contrast. Another problem is that how do you know that this is not because of thickness contrast? So, so then you start eliminating one by one. So sometimes, mostly it is easy, but sometimes it can be difficult because these images are two-dimensional projection of three-dimensional object. So it's going to be tricky, and it takes, from experience, actually things become better and better. Yes.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. So now next thing is basically there are two kinds of scattering. It can take place: elastic and inelastic, which basically define particle nature. Coherent and incoherent scattering, which are determined by wave nature. So we are going to learn what is, so elastic interaction. Basically, there is no energy exchange, or there is almost no, there is nothing as such purely elastic. There is always quasi-elastic, but we can in layman term we can say that it's elastic scattering. So when we use this term elastic and inelastic, basically that means inelastic there is an energy exchange. For example, EELS is an inelastic scattering, right? So yeah. So coherent and incoherent, basically that means coherent waves are the waves where there is a phase relation. So we'll learn about that. There has to be a phase relation actually, and it is determined by the wave nature. Yeah. So next thing, so there is no such thing as truly elastic, and for example, there is always some phonon exchange which takes place. So strict elastic scattering is a mathematical fiction. It's not, physics does not allow true elastic scattering, but for the mathematical simplification, we can consider that there is no energy exchange happening. Now, coherent and incoherent, which is very important. So any wave, you know that there is a wave basically moves in as a function of time and as a function of space. For example, Ansar and Pooja, they are going together towards NCL cafeteria. So when Ansar puts right foot front, Pooja is also putting in the same frequency, and they reach to the destination in the same time. Actually, suppose you look at them from the side and take a picture. Okay, when you take a picture, what do? You're freezing time and space both actually. So these are actually 4 dimensions, right? 3 dimensions of space, x, y, z, another dimension of time. So these are actually 4-dimensional picture. And then you take another picture, and then you after a certain time, and you know how much time has lapsed. For example, t1 time, you take their picture, and suppose then, and you take at t2, and you take t3, and at t3 time you can predict that Ansar and Pooja, whether their left foot will be which foot will be at the front, and something like that. So that means their movement is related. It is in the phase. So they are actually moving in a phase, actually like soldier marching, actually, right? So they are actually, so the phase coherency is basically in time and space also, because wave is always we define wave as kx minus omega t, right? Time. Okay, we define, so this is basically 2 pi over lambda. This is basically a wave vector, and this is a frequency, right? So when we say, so if you look at this wave, you can say that, for example, laser, it is same color, monochromatic, and it is it's coherent also, right? These are coherent, and these are not coherent. And again, you can see here these, if you identify these waves which of particular wavelength, these are in phase, but they are not necessarily in phase with other one, actually, other waves. So here, so the color basically represents the energy. Okay, so you can okay, basically, for example, blue or red, this is higher energy and this is lower energy, and you can see that they are correlated, and they are also correlated. So please remember, what is the application of this? I mean, is it just theoretical? So for example, Bragg diffraction is the application of a coherent wave. So Bragg diffraction diffraction pattern is formed only when these 2 or more waves are coherent. If they're not coherent, diffraction pattern will never form. never form. And this is not the disadvantage, it's an advantage also. I explained in HARDAF. In HARDAF, high angle, the beam which are scattered at much higher angle, so they are not coherent with the main beam actually. And this is an advantage. I think Ansar asked this question, that how do I know that there is no crystallinity contrast? So one of the smartest way here, Ansar, is that when you capture high angle scattered wave from this particle, so they are not coherent. So when they are not coherent, so they do not carry any diffraction contrast. So this one part is completely down. Suppose this is a HARDAF image. So HARDAF image will never have diffraction contrast. So there only you will have mass and thickness contrast. Primarily it will be Z contrast, mass contrast, right? Okay, so HARDAF images are very easy to interpret. So not having coherent is a problem, because you will never get diffraction pattern. So for example, you will never get dark field. You cannot get dark field if the waves are this wave. These waves have to be coherent actually. For example, you will never get selected area diffraction if these waves are not coherent. So the coherent waves are scattered at a smaller angle, not at the high angle, not at the large angles. That we will be discussing. So these waves which are scattering at a smaller angles, they are always elastic and they are always coherent. So you can interpret them. You can do crystallography, and it is mentioned here. Elastic scattering usually occurs at relatively low angle, and it's strongly tipped in the forward direction. But yeah, it is written here that at high angle, elastic scattering becomes incoherent. Now think of particles. These electrons are used in HARDAF images. They are very useful, and these are used in HRTEM and your bright field, dark field, all your crystallography, SAED. These electrons are very useful. Okay, so conclusion is that diffraction, if you want, you need coherency, complete coherency, better the beam is coherent. And now you can argue that how do you know that these are correlate? How did you judge? How did you know actually these? So then so we will discuss about that. There is a coherency, level of coherency. For example, I'm telling you that these two beams are of same wavelength, λ1 and λ2. This beam is monochromatic. How do I know that these electrons are monochromatic? All electrons carry the same energy. It's not possible. There is always a delta E, right? So that means if there is a delta E, that means there is a problem with the coherency. There is always we'll discuss this in third, fourth round when we are more at the advanced level. So yes.
So can you repeat the HARDAF image part, sir?
Yes.
Previous notes.
So HARDAF image, basically, let me go back. So HARDAF image, basically you form.
Not this one, sir. The 10
okay,
greater than 10.
Yeah. Is this? So HARDAF images are formed for the angle which are scattered at higher angle. So that's why the name is HARDAF, higher angle annular dark field, right? H stands for high, and this is for angle, and this is for annular, and D for dark, this is for field. So basically annular, basically your detector is annular, right? It's annular, right? It's basically it's like a donut shaped detector, because you're looking at electrons which are, if I look at it from the side, basically I'm interested in the electron which are, for example, electron beam is coming like this, your sample is here, and this is a straight electron, and your electron diffraction, Bragg diffraction is happening somewhere here at a very low angle, and these electrons are your coherent. Okay, and okay, so so your bright field, dark field, everything is happening here. bright field, dark field, HRTM, and your SADs, all happening at a very small, less than 1 degree, everything happens actually. Less than one, actually this is very large angle, it's not true. Actually it is fraction of one degree. We'll calculate this, you can calculate very easily. So this is happening at a very, very low angle. And oh, I'm sorry, this is all about all elastic scattering. So this is right. I'm talking about actually only Bragg diffraction. This is right. This is correct. So elastic interaction happens within 10 degree, but out of that we use electrons for bright field, dark field, HRTM. We use only the electrons which are getting scattered within 1 degree. You will be surprised to know, within 1 degree. We don't need actually more than 1 degree. Everything is useful is happening. Most of the time, useful things are happening within 1 degree. You can calculate actually from n lambda is equal to 2d sine theta. Okay, you can easily calculate. Yes.
So within less than 1 degree, we'll see the scattered.
Yes, because
also
D is the same. D is the same because D is your material property. D is the crystalline property of your material. But lambda is very small. Lambda is picometer, right? You got my point. See, lambda for X-rays is 1 point whatever 414 whatever. But how much it is for copper?
1.54 and
1.54 whatever. It does not matter. Yeah, it is one. It is an angstrom. Here we're talking about how much 3. We calculated that now 3 picometer. Manisha, how much it was? 2.7 picometer.
Yes, sir.
Now the angle is going to be that much smaller. Got it? I mean, suppose this is also 2. Suppose it's not 1.54, but it is just 2.7 angstrom. Just for so that means it is basically 10 to 2 order of magnitudes smaller, right? It is 100 times smaller. So angle is going to be 100 times smaller. Suppose you are scanning this as at 10 to 80 degree, right? Usually you scan in X-ray diffraction. So here actually you just divide it by 100. So it's a fraction of because lambda is very small. Okay, you consider n lambda is equal to 2d sine theta. D is the same because it's material property. It's basically interplanar spacing. But now your lambda is going down by 100 times. So the theta has to come down, right? This moment there's a call for me.
Yes, okay.
Hello. Yes. Yes. I'm actually in office, so yeah, this is not the right time. Okay. Yeah. I'll call you. I will. I'm not. I cannot promise you. I will. Okay. Yeah. So some Palduga cells. I hope it is understood now. So
Yes, yes.
so for Hardaf, actually when you say high angle, how high? So basically Hardaf, this is actually the advantage because otherwise you will have crystallinity contrast. So crystallinity contrast, you can see crystallinity contrast can happen when, for example, you are looking at when you look at a typical curve of X-ray diffraction, Bragg diffraction. So you look at basically path difference, right, from this beam and this beam, right? That's how you calculate. You come to this equation: n lambda is equal to 2d sine theta.
Yes, sir.
Right. Basically, this is path difference, right? Path difference has to be integral multiple of lambda, right? This is path difference, na?
Yes, sir.
Path difference can be calculated only when these two beams are coherent. Otherwise, you cannot. They're traveling in phase. You know the phase difference. Otherwise, how if you do not know, if suppose this beam is I'm sorry, this has become khichdi now. That's why I gave example of suppose this is your lattice, this is spacing, this is D, and you're probing. This is basically beam 1 Puja and beam 2 Ansar, and so they have to be in phase. Otherwise, you do not. How will you calculate? So please note this lesson that only for coherent beams they have to be coherent. They have to be coherent. They have to be monochromatic. Otherwise, it's going to be a problem, right? They have to be highly monochromatic, right? So if they are not coherent, So then you will never get crystallinity information. And that's a problem. That was a problem. Hardhaff was considered useless. These angles, these electrons, which are getting elastically scattered electrons, which people used to see at higher angle, they were considered useless for a long time by electron microscopists. Then they realized that they are useful. They carry Z contrast, and it is very good because the contrast is not masked by crystallinity. Otherwise, you have one more complexity. Now that complexity is lost because they are not sensitive to the crystalline information. It's an advantage. We don't want them because you have already picked up the crystallinity information from these low angle scattered electrons. I hope it is clear now.
Yes, sir.
Anybody else? Bhavna madam, Dr. Bhavna Joshi, is it?
This is much clear to me now.
Yeah. Deepali, student of Nandini.
Yes, sir. I got it. I got it, sir.
You are a student of Nandini, right?
Yes, sir.
So you have to know all these things. Nandini is very,
Yeah.
she's very knowledgeable in all those things. You know that,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Yes.
So it's better you learn all these things because.
Yes, sir.
And anybody, other student of Nandini? Somebody?
Yes, sir. Jyoti. Yes,
Jyoti is also.
Yes, sir. Good evening, sir. Jyoti.
Jyoti.
Yes, sir.
It is going to be very useful for your group.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Anybody from Gopi's group? Anybody from Gopi's group?
No, sir. No, sir. Nobody
Yes,
from
sir.
Gopi.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Who is
sir.
going-
Nivedita from CS Gopinan sir group.
Then you should know those things. Yeah. Anybody from CP Vinod's group? They're all they're going to use it. Gopi is not going to forgive you if you don't know those things. Dr. Gopinath is very his group is very deep into these basics. So Tushar Singh, who's your guide?
Yes, sir.
Who's your guide?
Shailaja ma'am.
Shailaja from theory, right? Computer.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So what are you doing here, Tushar?
Sir, for credit.
Just for credit.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's
sir.
not good actually. That's not good. Many students just attend just for credit. You don't have any other course, Tushar?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Only I am attending course, only yours course.
Why are you attending? So you were falling short of course. That's why you are here, right? But theory
Yes,
must
yes,
be
sir.
some other.
So these are in the next semester, no, sir?
But this is going to be useless for you. This entire thing, right? You're not going to
Sir,
use it.
I was free in this semester. Only one course was there, so I have to opt it.
Okay, no problem. Hemant Jaiswal, you are from which group?
Yes, sir.
Hemant, किस group से हो तुम? Jaiswal ji?
Sir, I'm MTech student.
MTech. Okay, you are from which? You have not joined so far, right?
Yes.
Okay, you are looking for like your answer, like. Okay. Vidya,
Yes,
you
yes,
are
sir.
from which place, which group? Vidya? Resume recording. So when I say coherent beams, so there is a phase relation. So that means you can see on your screen, the second beam is phase shifted, but you know how much shift is there. Initially they were in the same phase, but then one beam got scattered off from the top layer, another beam entered, and then so that means there is a phase lag. But because they are coherent, so you know how much it is, you can calculate. And that's what is your 2d sine theta is actually your d sine theta plus d sine theta, right? That's what you calculate, right? D sine theta plus d sine theta, right? When you, right? So that's what you calculate. Yeah. So there is a phase correlation. They are correlated. You can calculate it. Yeah. Yes.
Yes, sir. And sir, incoherent means
इनकोरेंट कुछ अता पता नहीं है, तुम कहीं पैर फेंक रही हो और कोई तुम्हारी दोस्त है उल्टा सीधा, राइट, कोई कोई कुछ भी डायरेक्शन में जा रहा है, राइट. Suppose you both started from a point A, you and your friend. So basically तुम्हारा दायां पैर पड़ रहा है, तुम्हारा छोटा क्या कहते हैं, your step size is you're walking slowly, another person, so there is no relation actually, right? You're walking. In fact, I walk in the student and I explain better in the class. So online it's very difficult to, this topic actually I explain in the class actually by walking with the students. Actually, I call one student. My offline classes, you can ask your seniors, probably 2 years senior. They will tell you my offline classes are very funny actually. Students just laugh and enjoy, and it's like fun field. It's like a game, but I can't play those games in the online class. Yeah.
Hello,
Because,
sir.
yes, madam, Pooja, madam, yes.
Sir, during this discussion, I got confused with two terms now.
Yes.
One is interference, that is there, that when waves are in phase, they come together to give an interference pattern.
Yes.
And here we are talking about some two waves which are also in phase where they are giving a diffraction pattern. But what we learned in 12th was like interference is different and the diffraction is different. So
See,
something like that.
diffraction, it's basically terminology. Let me explain. So diffraction pattern, diffraction pattern is the resultant of interference between these diffracted beams. So when these interference, basically these beams are interfering, these wavelets are talking to each other. You understand? They're interfering. Interference, basically, interference means they are interfering. They are talking to each other. So then this pattern is formed. So you learned correctly earlier. Diffraction pattern is the result of interference between different diffracted waves. Okay, and so they are not necessarily in phase. They arrived in phase, but when they talk to your material, after that they are phase shifted. And because of phase shifted, suppose they are in phase, so they will add up each other and they will form a maximum. And if they are out of phase, so they will form a minimum. Maximum in phase, okay, out of phase, minimum. So that's how you get the fringes. You can call
Yes,
it
sir.
diffraction pattern, or you can call it interference pattern. You can call it differently. It does not matter, right?
Okay, sir.
Some people call it Airy pattern, Airy disk. Basically, it is happening because they are talking to each other, right? These waves are talking to each other. They are interfering. That's why they are called interference. Interfering. Okay, the term itself. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So they interfere. They're when they interfere with each other. So if they are all in phase, they will add up and they will make a giant wave. Like one wave, beam two, beam three. They are all in phase. If they're 90 degrees, they will kill each other. Yes. Somebody raised hand, please.
Yeah. Hello, sir.
Yes.
Yeah. This is Raj Kiran. Sir, my question is how to know about the coherency of electrons. Because in case of waves, we can know their path difference, or we can know the whether they are in phase or out of phase. But in case of electrons, we only can calculate the energy. So, is there any means issue about?
Yes, very bright question. Very nice. Thanks for asking this question.
Means, are we going to deal with the de Broglie wave, or there is something else?
No. So the question is that how do we confirm that these waves, electron waves, which are coming from electron source, are waves are coherent?
Yes, that
so
is
one of the technique itself is basically you form the diffraction patterns. For example, you take known sample, for example, silicon or silicon oxide, okay, and you take a silicon sample, you take silicon granule, and which you know that it is crystalline, and then you basically allow these beams to come, and then if you get the diffraction pattern, that means these waves are simple technique, very simplest I'm telling you. Same thing is with X-rays. If X-rays are coming and then they, suppose you take a silicon oxide, silicon wafer, and if you're getting these X-ray diffraction peaks, that means these waves they have to be coherent. Otherwise, you will never get the diffraction pattern. You understand? That's the easiest technique, easiest way I'm telling you. So if you get from a crystalline object a diffraction pattern, that means surely that these are going to be coherent. Okay. That means there is a phase relation. So there are some waves are in phase, some waves are out of phase, but you know that they are out of phase or they are phase shifted by some angle or something. Phase relation is known. So for example, this wave is like this, and another wave is, let me change the color. I'm not a very good artist, but you know that there is a shift in this phase, right? They are also coherent. They are phase shifted, but they are, you know that. But if you calculate the distance, there it is here also. It's the same. Here also it is same. So that means they are in phase. So if the phase difference here is something different, here it is something different, here is something different. That means that they are incoherent. समझ में आ गया ना? You got my point, right?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. So if this distance is something else, this distance is something else. That means, so simplest technique is that you take the diffraction pattern. So, but you can say that no, I do not want to do that. You tell me at the origin itself. So, for example, this is the source, and which is throwing the electrons out. You tell me here itself whether this source is telling the source is basically there. Also, you put actually a monochromator, and the monochromator actually is basically a crystalline object. Again, it's a crystalline object. You can't escape it. So what it does that it diffracts, in particular direction and particular wavelength. Okay, so it basically, suppose there is a mix of a wavelength lambda 1, lambda 2, lambda 3. So you can actually it will split like a prism actually, right? So then you can collect highly monochromatic waves here, and then you know that this will be purely coherent. So you can filter. So if you put a monochromator and here, this can be a grating or it can be a crystal. Crystal is also a grating, right? Crystal where atoms are periodically arranged. This is also a grating. So in principle, all these techniques. So diffracted beam itself is a coherent beam source actually. Okay, what? So I will teach it in the sources.
Yes,
I'm going to teach it in detail when I teach. So I have a separate lecture on the electron sources. Okay, there I will teach you how to get coherent. So this will be repeated. If you have not understood, don't worry about that. I'm going to come back on this. Remember Orion structure. Okay, yeah. Anybody else?
Sir?
Yes.
Hello, sir?
Yes.
Manisha here. Sir, how can we determine the facets of the sample? Which technique is used, I mean to say?
Facet is same electron diffraction. Electron diffraction is the best way to determine the facet. Suppose, So for example, so it has long answer, but suppose this is your PM sample holder, and you put this particle, and for example, this is your nanocrystal, and then you are bombarding electron beam, and then you are basically, suppose these are your lattice planes, and okay, and then you basically suppose so this lattice planes, so this electron beam is coming like this at certain angle theta, and they are getting diffracted here, and this, so basically some beams are undifracted or 0 diffracted. So you basically see a very sharp spot in diffraction pattern here, and another spot you see somewhere here. Okay, and suppose you see this spot here, and then you are able to, in electron diffraction, you can calculate which this distance, right? and you can calculate d values. From d values, you can calculate which facet it is. Got it?
Okay, sir.
That's it.
And
That's
how
the
can
basic.
we expose a particular facet only? Like,
By rotating this. You can
layer?
rotate this now. You can rotate this. You can rotate this sample. So you can rotate actually. You have to rotate this beam. For example, you have this facet. You want to expose this facet. So you have to rotate in a way that you have to align this facet in such a way that it diffracts by this beam. So it basically is aligned at that angle theta. So it diffracts. Got it? So that's why you have to rotate. You have basically this rotating sample holder. Actually, you do not need to do that in nanocrystals, because if suppose there are 1 million these particles and this is like powder. So when you sprinkle it on your TM grid, so out of 1 million, so thousands will be, for example, I'm just telling you this number roughly. I mean, just for as an example, that suppose 2000 will be oriented in certain facet, another 3000 will be oriented in certain facets. So you will always find some crystals oriented in particular facets, and that's how you get a this diffraction pattern. A lot of spots come because of this reason, that you will always find all the facets diffracting actually. Okay, got it? And there is a concept of zone axis also. We'll come to this zone axis. For that, we need to understand the zone axis. I'll be coming to the diffraction in detail later on. Yes, Bolo.
I was saying, but if it is polycrystalline in nature,
yes,
then will it not be so complex to determine by that diffraction?
No, madam, because this is it is not. You can see that this is a polycrystalline. It's basically it's a single crystal, but polycrystalline will give you rings. It's not at all. We always look at the polycrystalline samples, because in chemistry, when you synthesize the particles, they are polycrystalline. In fact, polycrystalline sample is good because it will give you all the diffraction from many of the facets actually, which are falling into that zone axis. I'll give you the concept of zone axis later on.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. So yeah. So just remember this concept, that suppose you have a particle and facet means, for example, you have this different lattice planes. So electron beam has to get these facets should be aligned in certain way, that these one of these planes get diffracted. It shows electron get diffracted from this plane, and that is basically made sure by zone axis alignment. We'll learn this later on. Anyway,
Okay.
so you people digest this knowledge today. I'm not going to move to the next slide. Uma Sharan Sahu, are you there?
Hello, sir.
Yes, sir.
Who's
Yes,
your guy?
Sir, Dr. BLV Prasad.
Oh, BLV. Oh, very good. Okay, very nice. Okay, so BLV Prasad is very harsh. Okay, you should know all these concepts. He's okay. It's going to be useful if you are working with Dr. BLV Prasad. Very good, very good. Vidya, are you there still? I need to talk to her. Vidya? I think she's just she's logging in and just somewhere else. I am not sure. Sheetal Gawli, are you there? Sheetal Gawli, unmute yourself.
Yes, sir.